My husband won't accept my affair, baby, and wants a divorce. Should I force him to pay child support? I'm 27 and my husband is 29 and we have 3 kids. Boy 5, girl 16 months, boy 4 months. 2 years ago, I had an affair with a guy who was doing work on our house, which resulted in a pregnancy that I wasn't aware of. The affair lasted for about a week, and I thoroughly regret it now. During the entire time, I never stopped loving my husband and was actually more giving to him while it was going on. See, here's another case of that love bombing. After being with the other guy several times, I abruptly ended it. This happened when my son, who I had just put down for a nap, started crying while I was with the guy. When I heard that, I looked at the guy and thought to myself, my God, what am I doing? I pushed him off me and ended things right there. He was dumbfounded and apologetic, and I told him just to get the hell out of my house. When I found out I was pregnant some weeks later, I just assumed the child to be my husband's, as I was, only with the other guy on 2 occasions where he didn't wear protection. I know it only takes once, but our meetings occurred during a time of the month where I thought I was safe. We had our daughter, and she's just precious and is a real daddy's girl. Then, a little over 4 months ago, I gave birth to our second son, after which I had my tubes tied because we only wanted the 3 kids. The pregnancy was complicated, and I was put on bed rest during the final 2 months due to Prickle's amnesia. I looked up this preeclampsia, and what it is a condition of high blood pressure that some women get during pregnancy, and it can be very serious during this time. My husband was a gem, making sure I was well taken care of and doing everything I needed for the health of myself and our baby. Thankfully, everything turned out fine, and our son is now 4 months old and looks and acts just like his daddy. Things seem to be going fine in our marriage, and I had put that dumb mistake I made 2 years ago completely out of my mind, never even thinking about it anymore. Then, a couple weeks ago, on Saturday morning, my husband told me he had something he needed to discuss with me. His mom and dad were there, so they watched the kids while we went into the bedroom for privacy. I knew it was something serious. By the look on his face there, my husband told me he had all 3 kids. DNA tested some months ago. This startled me as he did this without discussing it with me before I could say anything. He said something that stopped me in my tracks. He told me our daughter wasn't his child. He said this calmly and without any buildup, so I didn't know what to say and just looked at him with my mouth wide open. I started breathing heavily and it felt like I was going to faint, so I sat down on the edge of the bed. I tried speaking, but the words just wouldn't come. He told me not to say anything or try to lie because he knows who the father is. He said I should get in touch with him about supporting his daughter as he no longer would be. Once we were divorced, I was completely crushed. Hearing him say that and laid back on the bed and just started crying, covering my face. My husband then kneeled down and pulled out a folder from under the dresser and handed it to me. I asked him what it was, and he told me to open it. When I did, I saw it was divorce papers and I lost my mind. I was crying so hard and so upset that I couldn't catch my breath. Meanwhile, he was as cool as a cucumber the whole time. I asked how he found out and he said it was none of my business. All he would tell me is that he's known for some time, but didn't act before due to my condition. He said now that I'm healed up and our baby is doing well, he wants out of the marriage. I asked if his parents knew. He said yes. He told them right after he found out. This really upset me as I'm very close to his mom and she didn't say a word to me about this. Ever since then, I've been in a deep depression. I beg for forgiveness and have tried everything to get him to reconsider her. But he just tells me no and is not willing to discuss it. He won't even let me explain my side of the story and tells me he doesn't care what I did. He tells me he cannot stay married to a cheater and there's nothing I can do or offer him to change his mind. He just wants a smooth divorce. And for the two of us to remain on friendly terms for the sake of our 2 kids. He keeps emphasizing 2 kids, making it clear he doesn't plan on being a father figure to our daughter. The other day, out of anger, I asked him how he could just give up his daughter like that before he had a chance to answer. I caught myself and apologized, telling him I shouldn't have said that. I told him I was responsible for everything and understood how he felt. But I wanted to keep our little family together. He told me I should have thought about that before I spread my legs for another man. He's right about that. But I can't go back and change what I did. God knows I would give anything to have that time back so I could do things differently. For now, he's still living at the house, but has moved into our son's room and is sleeping on the spare twin bed. I can hear the two of them chatting away in there every night, and it just breaks my heart thinking about what I've done. Other than that, nothing has really changed. He's still the happy-go-lucky guy and loving father he's always been. At times, I think we are on the road to healing, only to have him burst my bubble by asking me if I've gotten a lawyer yet. Needless to say, I'm in panic mode right now and will do anything to save my marriage. For now, I'm taking things one day at a time and keeping my fingers crossed that everything will work out. And now, for the comments, the updates. But before we do that, I want to remind you, if you've liked what you've heard so far, make sure you hit that like button. That will really help out the channel and help get this video seen by people all over the world. The first one is from a woman. She says, since you're married, he can't just walk away from his father responsibilities. In most states, he's considered to be the legal father, whether he wants to be or not. Get a good lawyer and have them pursue this. If he divorces you, you're still entitled, she says. Underline in bold to child support, even though the kid isn't his. Responses 2. From a guy, he says, women like you who commit paternity fraud are the absolute worst. You should be charged with a felony and have to pay a huge fine for your actions. And the Opie responds to him. She says, I didn't commit paternity fraud and would never do that. I sincerely thought he was the father. I'm heartbroken over this. So she's still sticking to the story that she didn't know the child wasn't his. I don't buy it. Responses 3. From a woman, she says, I feel sorry for your husband and daughter here. You caused this and are totally responsible for everything. Don't try blaming your husband. Why don't you go after the guy who knocked you up? And the Opie response, she says, I'm not blaming my husband and never will. As for the other guy, I don't want him to know, as I don't want him in our... And the final response is from a guy. He says, I hope your husband divorces you and goes on to live a happy life. His prospects are bright, even though he'll be paying child support for the next 18 years. On the other hand, is bleak. You'll be a single mother of 3 with 2 baby daddies who happens to be a cheater. Good luck selling that, he says. And now for the update. Update 1. Things have really spiraled out of control since I last shared what's been going on in my life. To give you a quick recap, my husband has been the only dad my daughter has ever known. He's been incredible with her, loving, caring, and treating her as his own, especially since everything blew up. Despite the chaos, every single day without fail, my husband has been on my case about getting a lawyer. He believes it's time for my daughter's biological father to step up and take on his responsibilities. I've consistently refused, telling him that he is her true dad, and I don't see any reason to disrupt our lives by calling her biological father into the picture. But my husband took an unexpected step that totally threw me for a loop. One day he made a call I never anticipated he would. He reached out to the owner of the company that had recently done some renovations on our house. This wasn't just any random call. The owner is actually the father of the man I had an affair with, and that same man works for his dad. When my husband spilled the beans, the owner was understandably upset, not just with the situation, but particularly with his son. He apologized profusely to my husband and made some big promises. He assured my husband that he would handle the situation and ensure his son accepts his responsibilities towards my daughter, including financial support. But he didn't stop there. In a move to show his sincerity and perhaps ease the tension, he refunded every penny we had paid for the renovation work. This was not a small amount, and it was a significant gesture. Since that confrontation, things haven't been quiet. The family's lawyer has been actively trying to reach me. She's left numerous messages urging us to go forward with a DNA test. I've been dodging these calls, not ready to face the implications of such actions. The situation escalated when I received a certified letter from the attorney. The content was serious. It asked me to get in touch immediately and warned that if I didn't respond within a week, they would initiate legal proceedings to establish paternity on behalf of her client. This has put me in a really tough spot. The last thing I want is for the biological father to intrude into our life. I fear what it might mean for my daughter's relationship with the man she knows as her dad, and I dread the thought of our family being torn apart by legal battles and forced interactions. Now, I'm caught in a whirlwind of legal threats and emotional turmoil, trying to protect the peace and stability of our family home. I'm desperate for a way out, but feel cornered by the impending legal actions. How can I navigate this situation? Is there a legal or peaceful solution that can prevent the biological father from disrupting our lives? I need to find a way to shield my daughter from potential upheaval, but feel increasingly powerless as the days go by. Can I stop this from happening, or am I forced to confront this challenge head-on? Second update. Recently, I had to get in touch with the lawyer of my daughter's biological dad because we need to sort out some important stuff about who her real dad is. We've got an appointment this Wednesday to have a DNA test done on my daughter. This test is a big deal because it will show for sure if this guy is actually her biological father. I thought maybe we could make things simpler by using the DNA results from a test my husband already took a while back. I figured if we could just use those results, we wouldn't have to go through the hassle of a new test. So, I called up the testing company to see if that was possible. Unfortunately, they told me nope, they can't use old results, which meant we had to stick with the plan for a new test. When I told my husband about this, his reaction was pretty much just good. He didn't seem too fussed on the surface, just kind of shrugged it off. But here's the thing. I know my husband really well, and I can tell he cares a lot more than he's letting on. He absolutely adores our daughter. Every day, he's still there, playing with her, holding her, and being the great dad he's always been, as if nothing has changed. Yet I can sense there's something off. He's keeping his cool, probably because of his pride, and maybe because it bothers him to think about financially supporting a child that might not be his biologically. This whole situation made a light bulb go off in my head. I started wondering if there's a way to make everyone sort of happy here. What if we could strike a deal where the biological father does start paying child support, since that's part of his responsibility, right? But after he starts doing that, he would then sign away all his parental rights to my husband. This kind of deal would mean that my husband could be recognized as her only dad legally, which is really the role he's been filling all these years anyway. And maybe with the financial support part, it would feel like a bit of a compensation for all he's done for our daughter. I think this plan could work because it would solve a few things at once. My husband might feel better knowing that he's getting some support for taking care of our daughter, and it would also tidy up any legal loose ends about her upbringing and who's responsible for what. Basically, my husband would continue being the awesome dad he is, but we'd have the peace of mind knowing that everything's squared away legally. If we could get something like this sorted, I feel like my husband would be more at ease with keeping things as they are now. It would maintain stability for our daughter, who really shouldn't have to deal with adult issues, and it would keep our family life running smoothly without any big disruptions. So, that's the plan I'm thinking about right now. I just need to figure out how to bring it up and get everyone on board with it. Final update. I've gotten a lot of requests for an update, so I thought I'd come back and give you one. A lot has happened since I last posted, so I'll try to pick things up from where I left off. After getting the DNA results back, the bio father of my middle child petitioned the court for visitation rights pending a custody hearing. The judge granted supervised visitation, but advised that since my husband was her legal father, custody would be denied unless my husband signed away his parental rights. So this is a really difficult situation for this husband to be, because now this biological father has stepped up. He wants to be in the child's life. He's willing to pay child support. So on one hand, I'm sure that husband is saying, okay, this is going to get resolved. But on the other hand, now he's got to give up that child. And it sounds easy, but he's been raising her as his daughter. He thought she was his daughter for what is she, 15, 6 months old. So this is not an easy decision for him. The OP goes on. She says, I was so happy about this as I thought there was a chance my husband would reconsider. When I talked to him, he told me that his attorney had already been in touch with the bio's attorney and they were working out an agreement. I begged him to change his mind, but he refused. He said he loves my daughter, but told me this was best for her and for everyone involved. I told him I didn't want the bio father in her life, and he told me I should have thought about that before I cheated. I told him I would give him all the child support checks I received from the bio, and he could do whatever he wanted with the money. He looked at me and asked if I was serious. I said yes, I was, and he told me I was a sick person. My husband ended signing away his parental rights. So now the bio is paying child support and has 25% custody of my daughter. I'm so upset about this that I can't even function. My husband, on the other hand, acts as if he's relieved by the whole thing. Our final divorce hearing is scheduled for the first week of next month. However, we've already sold our house and I'm back living with my parents for now. My husband took his proceeds and bought another house just down the street from where we live. I've agreed to everything he wanted in the divorce. So the hearing is just going to be a formality. I'm hoping between now and then he has a change of heart. But that's looking less and less likely with each passing day. I thought since he's no longer financially responsible for my daughter, he changed his mind. But he hasn't. She just doesn't get it. So in less than a month, I'll be divorced and forever brokenhearted. I've been in a constant state of stress since this all started, and I feel like I've aged 20 years. Meanwhile, my husband acts like he's walking on air without a care in the world. I love that man, and always will, and I miss him so much. I know I'll never find another one like him, so I'm not even going to try. I hope in time I can forgive myself and stop feeling so depressed about life. Thank you for all the support I've received here. Story 2. I collected evidence of my wife's affair for months before filing for divorce. It paid off massively with several break-ins throughout nearby neighborhoods. I thought it would be wise to get a security system. I went ahead and purchased a wireless one and set up the smoke alarms and each of the doors with open-closed sensors. My wife had been after me for a while to replace the smoke alarms, but when I told her about the sensors, she went ballistic. She couldn't articulate why she thought they were a bad idea, but she wasn't comfortable at all with them in place. I didn't see any sense in this. I consulted a friend about the issue. After hearing me out, he was in the same boat as me. It didn't make any logical sense to not have the door sensors, but this is where the course of my life changed. After some thoughtful silence, my friend asked me, "Have you ever thought there may be someone else coming and going while you're not there?" It seems to me that she doesn't want you to see this activity giving reason for her discomfort with the sensors, rather than punching him for accusing her. I just grumbled, but it nagged at me every day. A week later, I had a business trip overnight for 3 nights, and when I checked the alarm system in the evening, it wasn't online. I checked it the next morning, and it was back online. I swallowed this and didn't say anything to her, but it repeated the next 2 evenings offline and then back online. I mentioned this to my friend, and he said alarm systems aren't that flaky. Don't you think it's strange that it's offline when you are away, but never has this issue when you're around? So I went to the store and got a camera to hook up to the system and set the camera facing the system itself so that I could see if my wife was manually turning it off. I was tempted to tell her about it, but I didn't. The following week, I had a day trip in the home system, went offline again, but this time I had a recording. I visually saw my wife was disconnecting it. My friend that I've been chatting with about all of this happens to be a lawyer. If it weren't for him, I'd be screwed. I wanted to confront her with my suspicions immediately, but my friend told me, "No, you don't have enough evidence. You have to be patient." I asked him, "How will I ever get the evidence if she's turning it off?" He said, "Get a decoy," and explained it. So I bought another hub for the security system. Put the original under the counter and out of sight, but hooked up the new one as though it was the original. I was too anxious to see if it would work, so I told her I had another day trip. The next day I left for the day and stayed out of sight. Sure enough, she appeared on the recording, turning it off. But I got the system logs that the door open sensors had triggered. I had her, but my friend told me that I still didn't have enough. So I was very patient and set the rest of it up in stages each time, letting her get away with it, and each time gathering more and more evidence. I got another camera for the system, a wireless one, and placed it facing the entry door that had triggered and learned over several more discoveries. She was having a male guest. He was parking his car several streets over, and I found out which one was his. My friend told me it's easier to put a GPS on his car, which is illegal, but better than trying to follow him and get caught doing it. So I waited and told my wife I would be working in the city 40 miles away and would be doing it for the rest of the week. I took a week off from work that day. The lover came over and I put a GPS on his car. It would ping my hub once a minute for the next several days. I'd traced it on my laptop in real time, and when he was at home, the GPS gave me an exact location. In our state, we can look up property information online and find who owns the property. So now I had my wife's secret lover's name and his wife's name. They've been married for 17 years with all their kids in high school. Then I put the wireless camera in our bedroom only to find out they weren't fudging in our bed, but in our walk-in closet, which is spacious enough to get the job done. The camera picked up the audio, but not the video. I captured some video, though, such as them leaving the closet naked, but not actually in the actual. I waited for her to leave for shopping one day and repositioned the camera in the closet. I caught them in full glory the next time he came over. Now, what my friend told me while I had enough evidence, she will still put up a denial because she doesn't want to get him in trouble with his wife. So she'll dig in and won't give. Your best bet is to bundle all this stuff together and give it to her lover's wife anonymously. Once this happens, the dominoes will flow backward, and your wife will have to come to you with a confession. If you do it right, you can erase all your fingerprints from the whole situation. Keeps you from being the accuser. I like this plan, but I really wanted to get it over with. So I used some Movie Maker software and pieced together all the parts and stages of the investigation. I conducted dates, times, everything, and strung these together in a timeline. This part was kind of fun, so I added context captions for more information. Once this was all done, I had the urge to set it to music. So I used spy music like Impossible. And when the two lovers met at the door, I used Gershwin tunes, and for the big love scene, I set it to a rock music tune by Billy Idol. I even added close-up zooms. I was getting all the anger out of my system while I was making. It seems a little strange, but there was this odd thrill of having not only won the game, but mastered it. And now I was about to play her instead of the other way around. Might as well knock it out of the park. I added comedy pop-ups next to their heads with thought bubbles of quips. I started laughing hysterically after it was done. I couldn't help but wonder if I was losing it. But when I first handed it to the lover's wife, she didn't know who I was. I said I was doing a background investigation on her husband for a new position he was being considered for at work, And after following him around, this is what I discovered. I left the homemade movie with her, only much later did she learn who I was. So after I dropped it off with his cheated on wife, I waited for the bombs to fall. That evening, my wife came to me teary-eyed and confessed the whole thing. I asked her why now, and she told me the wife had called her with the information and how she had obtained it. She told my wife she would allow her to tell me about it first, but she was going to do it if my wife didn't. So my wife got in front of the train and spilled her guts about everything. I had the presence of mind to keep the wireless camera handy in the room, and when she started the confession, I started recording, got the whole confession on record. And as a bonus, I got her to confess. She'd been doing it for almost 4 years with this guy. She'd gotten pregnant with him once and it miscarried. I still recall the episode. She made up a fake medical reason for it. I was so worried for her health when it happened. Pretty stupid. I know it was highly satisfying to pretend ignorance while she confessed her heart out. I told her I wanted her to file for divorce, to start the papers rolling, and to assume she would get nothing in the settlement, but that I would give her something after the fact to get credit for my goodwill in all this. She would have none of it. She hired an attorney who tried to get her more than half the community property assets, including the house, and leave me with all the credit card debt and to pay for her attorney fees for my half. Her attorney made it sound like a one-night stand. My attorney argued she should have nothing and handed over all the evidence, including stuff the other wife didn't have. We didn't have a judge yet. So the judge took sides with my attorneys since I had the recording that she'd been deceiving me for almost 4 years. My attorney also argued that I had offered to give her something back if she would make it simple and short. I had also offered to bury the cheating so nobody had to talk about it anymore. And this was the purpose of making her file on me first so it would look like she left on her own. Which is true. She left me when she cheated in the first place. Oddly, her lover came to the hearing and sat in the back. And since we had never officially met, I guess he thought I didn't know who he was. I introduced myself to him on a recess break, and he gave me a fake name and lied, saying his hearing was coming up, which is why he was sitting there. I corrected him on it and told him exactly who he was and why he was there. I thought he might leave at this point, but he stuck it out. The lover and his wife divorced. She took the lion's share. Sometime later, they happened to be in a supermarket and were trading a superficial greeting. When I walked past them into the store, I didn't see them standing there, but I saw her in the store right after, but didn't say anything. She cornered me alone in the dairy section and said, "You dropped off some valuable information with me, not too long ago." I acknowledged, and we traded some. "How have you been?" statements back and forth until she said, "You're the husband." Busted. So I confessed to who I was. She thanked me for my self-control, and that I patiently gathered proper evidence and got it to stick. I got a call from my ex that evening. She found out the hand I played in this whole situation, and she was just crazy about it. Clearly, the other couple did the math and figured out who I was. The lover had called my ex and told her of this until that moment. All of them believed the original cover story that a work-related investigator had handed over his findings. I told my ex-wife, "So what? You came to me and confessed. I didn't have to play bad cop and pound a table and rake you over the coals. The writing was on the wall and it was time to confess. And you knew it." She said no. If I had known, I would not have confessed. Exactly. I got what I wanted in the only way I could have gotten it. And frankly, I had a blast doing it. For any of you who plan to confront your wife, don't do it in real time as she flirts or commits acts of suspicion of infidelity. Patiently wait. Take pictures and gather the evidence. I am a 28-year-old woman, and not too long ago, I received a phone call from my mother. It had been almost 6 years since we last spoke. She called to tell me that she needed my help because my sister and her husband were going through a very hard time. To give you a bit more information, the man my sister is married to now was once going to marry me. My sister is 26 years old, and for this story, I'll call her Emily. Emily became romantically involved with my fiance, Jake, who is 28 years old, on the very day we were supposed to celebrate our engagement. Jake and I met in college, and after nearly 5 years of being a couple, he asked me to marry him. He planned a surprise party for us on the night we got engaged. I remember feeling incredibly happy, like I was the luckiest person in the world. However, that feeling changed around 10 p.m. when I went outside to the backyard, hoping to get a better signal on my phone to call my sister. That's when I saw Emily and Jake together, kissing each other very intensely. At first, they didn't even notice me standing there, completely shocked. Seeing them like that was unbelievable to me. We had been together for almost 5 years, and this was happening on our engagement night. When they finally saw me, they stopped kissing immediately. But it was already too late. I ran away, got into my car, and drove to the nearest hotel as quickly as I could. I was so shocked by what I had seen that I was having trouble breathing properly. I was trying to convince myself that it wasn't real. While I was in the hotel, trying to come to terms with what happened, Emily sent me a text message. She said she was sorry, but admitted she was in love with Jake. She also mentioned that this had been going on for a long time. That message broke my heart all over again. Shortly after Emily's message, Jake sent me a text. He said something similar, explaining that he proposed to me because he thought if he committed to me, he could stop thinking about Emily. But that plan didn't work. Instead, his feelings for Emily grew stronger. He tried to explain that their actions weren't about hurting me. They believed they were meant to be together. I felt like I was just filling a space, a step for Jake to get closer to Emily. I spent a few days in a hotel, trying to get my thoughts and emotions in order. I was so upset and confused, almost convincing myself that everything that had happened was just a mean joke played by life itself. After about 4 days, I knew I had to go back home to gather my belongings and return to work, or I risked losing my job. Upon my return home, I was surprised to find that my family had been living with Jake, all of them waiting for me to come back. This might have been heartwarming under different circumstances, but not with the way things had turned out. Everyone had been trying to reach out to me, sending endless text messages that I never answered. So when I walked through the door, it was quite a scene. Everyone rushed to hug me and express how happy they were to see me. Emily, too, approached me with tears in her eyes and gave me a big hug. I was so overwhelmed by everything that I couldn't even respond. I just stood there quietly while everyone was fussing around me. After things settled down a bit, I gathered my courage and announced that I was only there to pick up my things and leave for good. Jake had been quiet up until then, but at my announcement, he spoke up to say he was moving out to live with Emily since everything was out in the open now. My family seemed oddly happy, smiling widely despite the situation not being a happy one for me. Emily stood close to Jake, giving me a sad look, but still smiling. I couldn't understand their reactions, and finally asked my family why they were smiling. I pointed out how Emily had ended my engagement and taken my boyfriend of nearly 5 years away from me. There was nothing funny or sweet about that. My mother then spoke, telling me that although we couldn't change what had happened in the past, we had to accept what comes next. She was suggesting that moving forward and embracing the future was the only way to deal with the situation. My family made it clear that they saw a future where Emily and Jake were together, despite how their relationship started. They admitted that the way Emily and Jake got together was wrong because it involved cheating, and they were sorry for that. However, they believed that it was for the best and wanted me to accept this new reality. Emily apologized to me for taking Jake away, explaining she couldn't control her feelings for him. She wished she had been able to tell me in a different way, rather than me finding out by seeing them together. Emily and Jake told me they were deeply in love and wanted to be together for the rest of their lives. Then, they kissed in front of me, which was too much for me to handle. My mother even cried, which made me very upset. I told them that their actions were wrong and not something to celebrate. To my surprise, my family didn't support my reaction. They thought I was acting selfishly and not being happy for Emily. They criticized me for making the situation all about me, which shocked me. I couldn't believe they were taking their side and accusing me of overreacting. I told everyone to leave my house immediately. I was bewildered by how my family was defending Emily and Jake, blaming me for being upset. My dad told me to stop acting like a child, saying these things happen and I should just accept it. He suggested I should be happy for Emily because she had found her soulmate instead of feeling jealous. Their whole attitude seemed crazy to me. I couldn't stand it anymore, so I decided to leave. I went to my room, packed some things, and left without listening to anything more they had to say. As I was leaving, they called after me, asking me not to go, but I felt there was nothing left to discuss. It was clear they cared more about Emily's happiness than about me or the difference between right and wrong. They were so focused on justifying Emily's actions that they ignored my feelings completely. After everything that had happened, I stopped talking to my family. Despite their many attempts to reach out to me, I chose not to respond. I felt that I didn't have to talk to them after how they had behaved. A little while after the incident, an invitation arrived for me to attend the wedding of Emily and Jake. I chose not to go to their wedding. Furthermore, the friends Jake and I once shared, as well as some of my family members who knew the full story of what had happened, also chose to stand by me. They declined the wedding invitation in support of me and stopped talking to my family because they didn't agree with how my family treated me following the engagement party incident. 5 years have passed since then. During this time, I have essentially removed my family from my life. They have occasionally tried to reconnect with me by sending birthday wishes or messages during the new year, but I have consistently ignored these attempts. I haven't gone as far as blocking them on social media, but I did remove them from my list of friends and followers. My social media profile is set to public, allowing them to see my posts. I did this deliberately because I wanted them to see how well I was doing without their presence in my life. I hoped that by seeing my happiness and success, they might feel a sense of regret or jealousy. This might seem a bit spiteful on my part, but it felt like a small form of retribution for the pain they caused me. I hadn't paid much attention to what was happening in their lives until about 4 days ago. That's when I received an unexpected phone call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, I was surprised to hear my mother's voice on the other end. I initially wanted to hang up the moment I realized it was her, but she sounded so anxious and desperate that I found myself pausing. She pleaded for just a few minutes of my time to talk. Despite everything, her distress touched a part of me, and I couldn't bring myself to deny her request outright. So I agreed to listen to what she had to say, if only for a brief conversation. During our call, my mother shared that Emily and Jake had decided to start a business together a few years back. Unfortunately, their business venture was struggling significantly. They weren't making any profit, and as a result, their investors had decided to withdraw their support. In a desperate attempt to keep their business afloat, Emily and Jake borrowed more money. However, this additional funding did not solve their problems. Now, they found themselves deeply in debt, facing serious financial difficulties, and being pursued by the people they owed money to. The situation had become quite dire for Emily and Jake. They were facing pressure from every direction: their employees, the investors who had backed their business, and the individuals they had borrowed money from. My mother reached out to me because she was aware that I was living a comfortable, luxurious life and had the financial means to potentially help them. She was asking for a significant amount of help. Specifically, she needed me to loan them nearly $75,000 to help settle their debts. I was puzzled why Emily hadn't approached me directly if they were in such dire need. My mother explained that Emily and Jake were both aware of the tension and past issues between us. They had explicitly told her not to contact me for help, remembering the fallout from 5 years ago. Emily, in particular, did not want me to know about their situation and was reluctant to accept any help from me. However, my mother felt she had no other option. She didn't know anyone else who could provide the financial assistance they needed on such short notice. By this point, Emily and Jake were struggling significantly, even to the extent of having difficulty affording basic necessities like food. Both my parents and Jake's family were doing their best to support them, but their resources were limited. Given that most of our family members, including Jake's parents, were retired, they couldn't afford to deplete their savings entirely to bail out Emily and Jake. Their financial support could only go so far without jeopardizing their own financial security. Faced with no other alternatives, my mother reached out to me, hoping I could be the solution to their financial crisis. However, the thought of helping them didn't sit well with me. After everything that had happened, after the betrayal and the way they had treated me, I felt no obligation to extend any help. Emily's decision to avoid asking me directly for help was the right one, as far as I was concerned. They had lost any right to ask anything of me the moment they chose to betray me. When I told my mother that I wouldn't be able to help them, she reacted with disappointment, calling me cruel and urging me to reconsider for the sake of family unity. I reminded her of the lack of consideration Emily, Jake, and the rest of my family had shown me during their affair and in the aftermath. My family had chosen to support Emily and Jake without a second thought for my feelings. Therefore, I felt no obligation to think of them now in their time of need. Achieving the success I have today wasn't easy. It took a lot of hard work and dedication. So the idea of giving away $75,000 to two people who betrayed me didn't seem right. When I expressed my refusal, my mother became very emotional over the phone. She cried, telling me she never imagined I would become someone she viewed as selfish. She warned me that my sister and her husband were facing serious trouble, and that if I didn't help, the consequences would be severe. Despite her emotional plea, I remained firm in my decision and ended the call. Following that conversation, my mother began sending me messages almost every hour, trying to persuade me to change my mind. She insisted that seeking revenge at this time was petty and that the situation Emily was in demanded immediate help. She feared that if I didn't assist, I would come to regret it later. I found myself at a loss for words, not wanting to be seen as the villain in this scenario. Wondering if I was in the wrong for refusing to offer financial aid to my sister after she had a role in such a significant betrayal, I sought opinions from others. Eventually, I made the decision to block my family on all forms of communication. I hadn't done so before for two main reasons. First, I wanted them to see my life successes and feel a sense of envy. And second, I worried that cutting ties completely might be something I'd regret if anything bad happened to them. However, I've reached a point where those concerns no longer hold weight for me. Reflecting on it, I realize I should have removed them from my life much sooner. The reluctance to help my sister now doesn't stem from pettiness. It feels like the most logical step. They've already squandered a significant amount of money, and I doubt that lending them more would solve their problems. It's unlikely they'd be able to repay a sum as large as $75,000. While I'm financially stable, that doesn't mean I can afford to give away such a large amount without expecting it back. Even if the situation involved a close friend, I would still expect repayment. Given that Emily and Jake are neither close to me nor in a position to repay, my decision to not provide financial assistance feels justified. I saw no good reason to offer them help. It was pretty straightforward. I talked to a few of my friends to see what they thought about the situation, and they all agreed with me. They said I was right not to lend the money, not because I wanted revenge, but because it didn't make sense to help people who had hurt me before. After that, I blocked my mother on my phone and social media so she couldn't send me guilt-ridden messages anymore. With her blocked, I felt relieved and free from any further pressure. Then, something unexpected happened. While I was at work, my neighbor called me. She said there was a couple outside my house yelling for me, refusing to go away. They had been there for about an hour, causing a commotion. I had a strong feeling I knew who it was even before my neighbor described them to me. Sure enough, her description confirmed my suspicions that it was Emily and Jake causing the trouble. My neighbor was concerned and said I needed to come home to handle the situation because she didn't trust their intentions. Given Emily and Jake's history, I couldn't disagree. I thanked her for letting me know and rushed home, worried about what they might do. I made it back home in about 15 minutes and found them trying to pick the lock on my front door. I confronted them, asking what they thought they were doing. In an attempt to call the police, I pulled out my phone, but Jake quickly knocked it from my hand. Emily approached me, saying they just wanted to talk and didn't want anything from me at that moment. I was cautious and told them if they had something to say, it would have to be outside because I wasn't going to let them into my house. Whatever they needed to say, they would have to say it right there in my yard. They seemed okay with staying outside, which was a big relief for me. Inside my head, I was thinking that it would definitely not be a good idea to let Emily and Jake into my house. They were already showing signs of being pretty upset and aggressive, and since they mentioned they didn't want anything from me, I was confused but cautious about what they might say or do next. Emily began the conversation. She explained that my mom had filled her in on our phone call, including how I hadn't responded to any messages afterward and had gone as far as to block them on my phone and social media. Emily thought my behavior was really unfair. She pointed out that it had been 5 years since the incident that caused all the trouble between us. According to her, I should have been able to get past what happened by now. Instead, she accused me of just trying to make a scene and attract attention from our family by acting in a way that she considered childish and overly dramatic. She felt very insulted because I had refused to help them out financially when they were in a tough spot. The reason she came to talk to me was about the financial help they needed. Emily told me that she had managed to scrape together some money for the time being by selling their house and all their jewelry, but she was worried about what would happen in the future. Since she couldn't sell their house and jewelry again, she wanted to know if she could rely on me to help them out if they needed financial assistance later on. I was very clear in my response. I told her she should not expect any help from me, no matter what the situation was. I was really upset by their nerve to even ask for such a thing, and I even told her that it was taking a lot of effort for me not to lose my temper right then and there. I suggested that it would be best for them if they just left. But then Jake said something that really shocked me. He insisted that they wouldn't leave until I signed some sort of document promising that I would give them money in the future whenever they needed it. This idea seemed completely ridiculous to me. Even if I were somehow forced into signing such a document, I knew that it couldn't be legally binding. I'm pretty sure the law doesn't allow for contracts to be enforced if one party is pressured or forced into signing. And the idea that they thought they could manipulate me into agreeing to such a thing was ludicrous. After Emily and Jake tried to confront me at my house, I told them very clearly that they needed to leave. Emily didn't take this well and actually pushed me, trying to argue that because we're family, I somehow owed it to them to provide help. This moment was really shocking to me. I felt so angry and upset that she would physically push me, and for a brief second I thought about reacting physically in return. However, I knew deep down that responding with violence wasn't the right answer. It would only escalate the situation and make things much worse. So I quickly decided on a different course of action. I remembered that my phone had fallen to the ground earlier when Jake knocked it out of my hand. I picked it up and made a swift decision to get away from them as quickly as possible. I ran to my car, which, fortunately, I had left running when I initially got out to confront them. This allowed me to get into the car and drive away quickly, without having to waste any time starting the engine or checking to see if they were following me. I didn't even glance in my rearview mirror because my main focus was putting as much distance between us as possible. Once I felt I was far enough away and safe, I called the police to report what had happened. I explained the entire situation, from the unexpected confrontation to their refusal to leave my property. After making the call, I drove back towards my house, timing my return so that I arrived just as the police did, about 20 minutes later. I told the police officers everything, providing a full account of the events. They listened and then took action by arresting Emily and Jake. While I was aware that the legal consequences they faced might not be very severe, the fact that the police took them away gave me some peace of mind. It meant I didn't have to deal directly with them anymore, at least for the time being. In the hours that followed their arrest, I was surprised by the silence from my family. I had expected someone to reach out, perhaps to argue on Emily and Jake's behalf, or to criticize my actions, but there was nothing. No phone calls, no messages from other family members. This silence made me wonder. Perhaps my family had finally decided to respect my boundaries and leave me alone. Or, alternatively, they might be waiting for the right time to contact me, possibly hoping that emotions would cool down and they could approach me in a different way later on. A week went by since that intense day, and during that time, I began to think that maybe, just maybe, my family had decided not to bother me any further. Calling the police on Emily and Jake might have sent a clear message that I was serious about enforcing my boundaries. However, I soon realized that my hope for a peaceful resolution might have been premature. After everything that had happened, I thought I had finally put some distance between myself and my family's attempts to reach out. But life had another twist waiting for me. This time, it wasn't Emily or Jake trying to get in touch. It was my parents. They came to my house yesterday, wanting to have a conversation with me. Seeing them at my doorstep was unexpected. They didn't have the same demanding presence as Emily and Jake did. Instead, they appeared more humble and remorseful, which made me decide to let them inside. As soon as we were inside, my mother couldn't hold back her tears. She immediately began to apologize for taking Emily's side instead of mine, right from the moment she stepped into the house. It was clear that my mother was deeply regretful of her past actions, and her apology seemed sincere. My father, standing by her side, shared his perspective as well. He explained that after they found out about Emily and Jake's arrest, and the fact that they had physically pushed me, they started to see things differently. This incident made them realize how wrongly they had acted, leading them to decide to cut off ties with Emily and Jake. Throughout their visit, my mother continued to cry, showing how sorry she was. My father took the time to express their apologies for not supporting me from the beginning. They admitted that they had made a mistake by siding with Emily, acknowledging that I was the one who had been wronged all along. I listened to them and told them that I appreciated their apologies and their willingness to see their mistakes. However, I also made it clear that, for me, it felt like too much time had passed for us to just go back to how things were. I had become accustomed to living my life according to my own rules, making decisions for myself without their influence. While I was thankful for their visit and their attempt to apologize, I couldn't see myself putting in the effort to repair our relationship. The past actions and decisions had caused too much damage, and trying to mend our relationship now seemed pointless, even though they were my parents. They seemed hopeful at first, believing that we could fix our relationship if we all really wanted to. But that was the crux of the issue. I no longer had the desire to make amends. I had found a sense of peace in living independently, away from the family drama. I respected their attempt to make things right, but I had to be honest with them and myself. I was done trying to salvage what had been broken. They looked a bit disappointed by my response, but they eventually accepted my decision. Before leaving, they asked if I would consider unblocking them, just so we could keep some lines of communication open. After some thought, I agreed to unblock them. It was a strange decision to make, considering everything, but I felt it was an okay compromise. So I unblocked my parents, marking a peculiar chapter in our ongoing family saga. It felt odd, but perhaps it was a small step towards something, even if it wasn't a full reconciliation. So I, 27 female, have an older sister, 31 female, who I haven't been in touch with for the past 7 years. We didn't have a fallout or fight. We weren't in touch because she just disappeared one day. 7 years ago, my sister dumped her twin toddlers at my place and told me that she'd be back at the end of the day after running some errands. Her kids were 1.5 years old at the time, and I agreed to watch over them for a while because it wasn't uncommon for my sister to ask me to babysit her kids if I was at home and she had work to do, or if I ran was unavailable. Our parents had passed away when we were both young, like when we were 10 or something, and we'd been brought up by our maternal aunt, 47 female. I believe that when my aunt brought the kids to my place, she couldn't take them because she was sick. At that time, I was almost done with college and living with my friends in an apartment. They were out celebrating, so I stayed back. I took care of the kids for a while, but after 9 o'clock, I got worried because my sister was very late. I tried calling her many times, but the calls didn't work, and she didn't reply to my texts. I waited a bit more, then asked my aunt for help. She tried calling my sister too, but her calls couldn't get through either. I checked my sister's social media, but it was all turned off, so I couldn't contact her there either. My friends came back around 11 at night and also tried calling her, but no luck. In the end, I had to accept that maybe my sister didn't plan on coming back that day, but that one day turned into a week, then a month, a year, and finally, 6 whole years. My aunt and I reported her missing 24 hours after we couldn't find her. We didn't want to think she did this on purpose and didn't want to return. It sucked. But a few months later, I did come to terms with it. My sister and I weren't particularly close growing up since she was different from me, but I still loved her like family does. She turned into a bit of a party animal in high school and decided not to attend college. Instead, she moved in with her high school boyfriend in a small apartment at 19 and got a job instead, which is okay, but they'd waste a lot of their income unnecessarily and had no sense of responsibility. Most of it would go into drinks at clubs, clothes and makeup, and her boyfriend's sneaker collection. So she'd ask my aunt for rent much too often for her liking. And that increased when she got knocked up and had to go to the doctors frequently. Fortunately, my aunt could afford it since she ran a successful business and had never had any husband or kids of her own. We were all the family she had, so she did it without complaint. But I could tell that she wasn't pleased with my sister's lifestyle because she'd look very disappointed whenever my sister would come around asking for money. So I made up my mind to work harder to not let her down. Of course, eventually my sister disappeared along with her boyfriend, and none of their friends knew where they'd gone either. So we just had to make our peace with the fact that they probably wouldn't come back for a long time. Or maybe ever. I didn't know whether she was even alive up until last week. 6 years have passed, and now I'm an investment banker and I'm living with my aunt in my childhood home. My aunt and I had repurchased the house I grew up in with my parents recently and have been living here ever since. My aunt and I had pretty much accepted that my sister wasn't going to come back, but then she made a sudden reappearance last week and took us both by surprise. She'd been back for 3 weeks and had asked a few of her old friends to help her find us, and she finally had. She seemed happy to see us at first, but my aunt and I had mixed feelings. You don't just disappear for 6 years without warning, then come back and expect everything to be just the same. We tried to be polite and civil to her, but the conversation was strained at best, We didn't ask her where she'd been because honestly, it didn't feel like there was a point, and she didn't offer to explain herself either. After some time, she asked about her kids and wanted to see them again. But her kids didn't live with us. My aunt and I took care of them for almost a month after she disappeared. I was a college student, and my aunt worked, so we couldn't manage to care for them full time. We were old enough to take care of ourselves, but the kids needed constant attention. I had to study, and my aunt couldn't manage both work and kids. So, after nearly a month, we had to make a tough choice to let another family adopt them. Since they were technically abandoned, they were free to be adopted. After a long process, a kind couple named Adam and Martha adopted them. We still keep in touch and visit the kids. I didn't tell my sister everything because I knew it would upset her, and I didn't want her to bother Adam, Martha, or the kids. I just told her we had to give them up for adoption when she left them with me, without sharing the rest. When I told her, she thought I was joking at first, but my aunt and I were serious. It wasn't a funny situation. Eventually, she realized we were telling the truth and got very upset with us. She was just hysterical. She began to scream at us, told us that we were cruel and heartless monsters and whatnot, and then started sobbing violently. My aunt and I let her throw a tantrum, but after she seemed to calm down a bit, I asked her to leave since we had nothing to talk about anymore. She did leave, but she was still crying, and it was really disturbing to see her that way because she wasn't a very emotional or expressive person. So for her to completely break down in front of us was a pretty big deal. My aunt and I didn't know how to react to this and decided that we just weren't going to talk about it at all. It was draining enough that my sister had shown up after so long and had expected things to have remained the same after 6 long years and then screamed at us for doing what anyone else in their sane minds would have done. Neither of us wanted to discuss it even more and just make it worse for us. So we didn't talk about it and pretended it never happened. But yesterday I received an email from my sister and she said a lot of things that I feel like I have to talk about. My aunt has a lot to deal with because her business is doing exceedingly well and I don't want to disturb her or ruin her vibe right now by bringing this crap up. So I'm here instead. My sister said that she'd been counting on me and she trusted me to keep her kids safe and sound when she was away. But I failed her by abandoning them. She was disappointed in me and wanted me to help her find her kids so that she could take them back with her now. She also wanted my aunt and I to apologize to her for behaving badly with her. The other day, if we wanted her to be a part of our lives, she ended the email by saying that she'd be waiting for a reply and told me to make it quick because she wanted to see her kids as soon as possible. The email reeked of entitlement, and I lost my cool after I read it because it was just disgusting. She hadn't even told us where she'd been for the past 6 years, but for whatever reason, she now expected my aunt and me to act like we were family again, in the heat of the moment. I replied to the email saying that she did her kids a favor by leaving them at my place and then disappearing from all of our lives. Because now at least those poor kids have a chance of having a better life that she herself would never have been able to provide for them. I told her that she would have been a terrible mother to her kids, and they're lucky that they escaped her and sent that email. In the evening, my aunt came to my room and told me that my sister's boyfriend had just called her. Her business contact info is listed on her website, and that's the number he called, and told her that she'd received and read the mail that I'd sent and was beside herself with grief. She'd had a total mental breakdown and kept repeating that she wanted her kids back and had to be sedated because that's how grief-stricken she was. I feel really guilty now and feel like I was a little excessive with what I said it to, for telling my sister that her kids were lucky that she'd abandoned them because they have better parents now. Update 1. Hi, folks. Firstly, I just want to thank everyone who responded to the original post, sending love to everyone with messed up families and psychotic sisters. I know it's not easy, but we deal with it somehow. It's been 3 days since I posted, and the response has been overwhelming. Now I know I'm not at fault here, and whatever I said in that email was 100% true. It's not my fault that she had a breakdown because she brought that onto herself by abandoning her kids with no explanation. She never even bothered to communicate that she wanted me to take care of them during the time that she'd be gone. She lied to me and told me that she'd be back to take them at the end of the day. So I'd signed up to babysit them for a couple of hours, not for the next 6 years of my life. As much as I love my nephews, babies are quite a handful and I couldn't have them around while also working towards my future. I didn't agree to that, so it was just crazy for my sister to even expect that her kids would still be living with me after 6 years. And now, a couple of things about her email that I just have to address and get it all off my chest. I didn't abandon her kids. If anything, I helped them out by leading them to better and more obvious parents who actually care for them enough and take better care of them than my sister did. My sister is the one who abandoned them at my place and went off to God knows where for 6 years. Also, she still hasn't told us where exactly she'd been, and honestly, I don't care enough to ask either. But if she doesn't even is that, then it's kind of entitled of her to expect that we owe her anything at all, let alone help find her kids. As for an apology, she can pretty much forget about it because I don't want her to be a part of my life anymore. She hasn't been a part of my life for years, and I'll be just fine if she continues to not be a part of my life. It's been 3 days and we haven't heard from her or her boyfriend again, and I'm okay with that. People can call me heartless, but I don't care about what happened to her after the breakdown. My aunt and I faced several difficulties after she left and were worried sick for many a day, but she didn't bother to check on us either. So why should I extend the same courtesy to her? My sister can play the victim all she wants, but I know for a fact that in this situation she's far from the victim. She's the one who created this mess, and she now has to deal with the aftermath of it herself. I can't even imagine how entitled and delusional a person has to be to act out and throw a tantrum after abandoning her own kids and then finding out that they'd been adopted by a better family. At least we want to have them in my office since they deserve to know. I don't know what exactly they're going to do to deal with this, but I trust them and know that they love the kids with all their heart and even more. They won't let them come in harm's way. And by harm, I mean my sister Adam was concerned when I told him and pleaded with me not to let her know who her kids had been adopted by. But I reassured him that he had nothing to worry about because she might be their biological mother. But they were the kids' actual parents, and nothing could take that away from them. Not even my sister. That seemed to pacify them a bit, and I actually regretted not letting them know earlier, but I just didn't want them to panic unnecessarily. But it's all right. They know now, and I'm hoping that my sister stays away from all of us after this update too. Okay, so my sister decided to get in touch with me again today. It's the weekend, so my aunt and I were both at home and she showed up at our house about 3 in the afternoon. We didn't even want to open the door to her because this was getting increasingly ridiculous with every week that passed, and we told her to leave through the intercom, but she told us that she wasn't leaving until we informed her where her kids were right now. Obviously, we cannot give out that information without prior permission to anyone at all, especially not to her. So we told her that we didn't know, and that if she didn't leave, then we'd call the police and make her leave forcefully. And then she began to plead with us. She started saying stuff like she only wanted to see them one time, and she didn't even care if she had to see them from a distance, but she just had to get one look at them. There was a lot of pain in her voice, and I could see through the cameras that she was literally on her knees. It broke my heart because no matter what happened, I'm still a human being. And I did feel sorry for her. I felt awful. But I tried to steel myself by reminding myself of what she'd done in the past and thought of the kids before telling her for the last time that she needed to leave. Or I really would call the police and report it for trespassing. But she continued to cry right on the doorstep. I was left with no other option and was forced to call the police, who arrived 15 minutes later and took her away. But even then, she put up a fight and had to be taken away, kicking and screaming. My aunt had just sat through the whole thing silently with her head in her hands, and I can't even blame her because this is just heartbreaking. Not because my sister can never get her kids back, but because my aunt literally raised us both. And now she has to watch one of the kids she raised completely fall apart right in front of her eyes. And she couldn't even do anything to fix things. She just had to watch it all happen and let it go. It can't have been easy for her to watch my sister in that state. Neither had it been easy for me. And it's just really disturbing because I know she's suffering a lot right now, but she has nobody else to blame for this situation except herself. I don't know why exactly she disappeared, but no matter what the reason was, I highly doubt it makes what she did any more forgivable. I just want her to go back to wherever she was, not out of hatred, but simply because I don't have the emotional strength to watch my sister break down over and over again and cause someone else this amount of pain. I just can't do this again and again. I might even have to start looking at lawyers to get a restraining order against her. I don't know how effective that will be, or even if I qualify for it, because this is technically not a dangerous situation that we're in, but we never know. Things can go south really quickly. More so with my sister, especially since she's clearly very emotionally volatile right now. I just don't know what to do or what to think, and I'm absolutely numb right now. Nothing feels the same anymore after my sister's return, and I highly doubt I can go back to living my usual life again. In a way, it's ironic that she first disrupted all our lives by disappearing, and she's currently doing the same thing with her reappearance. It puts into perspective how selfish she actually is, and how she can never be bothered to think about literally anyone except herself. I hope she and her boyfriend have been able to make something of themselves in the last 6 years, because I just want them to go away now. I don't even care where she'd been or where she went. I just want her gone, and for good, because nothing is going to come out of her return. Update 3. My sister just sent me another email 5 hours ago, and I came back home immediately after reading it and saw my aunt to do the same after forwarding it to her. 2 days have passed since the last update, and today we finally received an explanation as to where my sister had been for the last 6 years of our lives. So, 7 years ago, a month or so before she disappeared, her boyfriend's uncle offered him a job for free at his hotel in Miami, but he'd made it very clear that he couldn't bring his kids along. My sister was still welcome, if she could make yourself useful in some way. So she went with him, and the two of them started working there for a much higher salary than what they made here. She didn't tell us anything about it because she believed that if my aunt found out about what she was earning, then she might ask her to repay all the money that my aunt had helped her out with an out of fear and greed. She kept her mouth shut about where she'd gone over time. They'd worked hard and been promoted, and they'd finally saved enough to start a business of their own in Miami, which is what they were about to do. But first, they decided to take a trip back here so that they could finally take their kids back with them. They hadn't had the foresight to think that we might have actually given their kids up for adoption, because my sister was sure that my aunt and I loved them too much to let them go anywhere else. So she'd been counting on us to look after them in her absence, and raise them well so she could take over whenever she'd be able to, which happens to be now. But there was just one hitch in her brilliant plan, and that was that. She hadn't even told us anything about this, and had disappeared without a word. She'd probably forgotten that my aunt and I were real human beings with minds of our own, and not just robots who would follow whatever she'd programmed us to without questioning it at all. So now she was begging us through her email to at least let us see her kids before she went back and keep in touch with the adoptive parents, so she could have some degree of contact with her kids. I don't fully understand what the intention of this email was. Probably to make us realize that she'd been working through these years and that would suddenly make us have a change of heart or something. But if that really was the intended impact of her story, then my sister has failed miserably. She didn't talk to us for 6 whole years because she was too afraid that my aunt would ask us to pay her back, which is just so insane. First of all, my aunt is the last person to ask the US for money, and even if she had, my sister should have had the gratitude to do it without question because she owed it to our aunt. Also, on top of that, I don't think any parent who's ready to abandon their kids for 6 years without even looking back to check on them for the sake of a couple of extra bucks deserves any sympathy. Least of all, not someone as materialistic and shallow as my sister. Whatever she done was unforgivable, and her story just made it worse. But at least now we don't have to feel sorry for her anymore. She's just a despicable excuse of a human being. And my aunt and I decided to block her without even a response, because that's just what she deserves. We've also told Adam and Martha about the email, and if they are willing to opt for legal action against her to prevent her from harassing us any further, then we'll definitely be joining them. My aunt and I are disappointed that she turned out this way, but we're not surprised in the slightest. We're surprised that she and her boyfriend were able to make something of themselves, but that's about it. If they try anything funny with us after this, then they'll be looking at a restraining order. But I don't suppose she'll risk that since she has her new business to look forward to. Now, I wish she would just go back and never return. I don't want to see her ever again.